and welcome to Comic Book Junkies. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Joe.
And today we got another two-piece special for you. We've got Swamp Thing by Alan Moore, Stephen Bissette, and John Totalbun. That's our book of the week for this review. And then also later, the very hyped return of the Spec Corner. You know, you got to stick through the whole episode if you want to get that nugget at the end. You know what I'm saying, boy? Got to get that hot piece hitter because we've got information that you don't want to miss. So, Joe, Swamp Thing, our book of the week by Alan Moore, classic book. I'm sure you've got some backstory you're going to fill us with facts with, but this is kind of a callback to our first episode. We read a work of Alan Moore when we reviewed Watchmen. So it's cool to kind of revisit Alan Moore and his work again, and we'll see how this compares.
So not too much background this time, just that it was written in 1983, which was before Watchmen, another classic written by Alan Moore. And I was watching a little interview by him before doing this recording. He was a little sarcastic in saying this, but he said that he tried to take like a method acting approach to this. So he'd stare in the mirror and picture himself as Swamp Thing.
I bet it wasn't hard.
All right.
Fat wizard.
Right. The beard isn't too far off from, all the mud that's all over Swamp Thing. But he made a joke about him sitting in the tub with mud.
No, dude, it was mud butt because he can't wipe.
Yeah, dude, totally looks like he can't wipe, but super good writer. So I was very excited to start this series. So it starts with chapter 1, which is actually issue 20 of the saga of the Swamp Thing. The first 19 issues were like an origin story of the character, but he took it a step further. So in issue 20 of Saga of the Swamp Thing's trudging through the swamp, looking through some debris and what looks like a crashed airship to find that someone that looks like a human at one point, but's clearly like a mutated being, was dead in the debris, which is his main villain, Arcane.
Yeah, dude, Anton Arcane, he's a real sack of shit. Pretty much, your typical evil scientist. I mean, he's got a lot of history, going back kind of with the original Len Wein, Bernie Wrightson run of the, 1973, 74. So he kind of stems back to there. He kind of is the big bad, as you said, and he is also responsible for a lot of the supporting cast that Swamp Thing kind of deals with, notably Abby Arcane, who's, his daughter, niece, something like that. You know what? That's bad on me for not knowing that comic knowledge, but Abby Arcane, clearly the last name. Yeah, exactly. They're related. And for, him being like the bad thing, he's kind of his antithesis, but he gives something good to Swampy's life, whatever you want to consider Swampy's life. But
Swampy was pretty sad about seeing him dead in the plane crash too,
which is something I thought was cool because I mean he hates his guts and he like wants him dead pretty much, but he kind of can sympathize with that. He's like, like the monsters, he's like, monsters don't have like the same protection that they used to. There's less dark for monsters now, and Anton Arcane gets to leave that, and that's something he's kind of envious of. It's not like necessarily that he wishes he was dead or anything, but the world's kind of changing around him, and kind of to have that little bit of peace he's kind of envious of.
He starts feeling bad for himself too. He's talking about like in the 15th century about how there was more shadows to hide behind being a monster, and now that they're in the age of like software and technology, there's not too many shadows for monsters like him to hide behind, which I thought was pretty sad. And then while that's going on, we see that some general is out to kill not only Swamp Thing, but like all of his friends and anybody in the area.
Yeah, Captain Sunderland's a real bitch. And he's got it out for him. He's got, the gov ready. He's got the feds sent out to the woods to go torch that shit. They got like the giant lights on to try and, shake him out of the shadows, which is obviously, a little bit of allegory there and something he laments. He doesn't really have anywhere to hide when they're chasing him down. I do like that he's like, rocking some dudes and punching them in the head and throwing them. Swampy's, dispatching the enemy as he does. At the end, he gets pulled up on like Tupac and just dies, dude. They just like blah, blah, just right in his head. But I don't know what shooting a vegetable does, but it works. I mean, that's pretty much issue 20. This isn't really necessarily where the story begins so much. I mean, this issue is literally called Loose Ends because this is where Alan Moore kind of starts his run. But to, before he could start doing what he wants, he has to wrap up the previous writer for the last 19 issues story. And issue 21 is where it really gets popping.
Yeah, for sure it does. And that's a good way to put it. He's basically wrapping up the last person's run on the arc. But it does introduce Abby, which is a close friend of Swamp Thing. Well, maybe they did in the first 19 issues, but he seems to want to find her during this whole thing, her and her husband Matt. And then upon shooting him, he's getting kind of romantic there too. He's talking about how this beetle was fighting some ants, and there became so many ants that it overpowered the beetle as he's getting shot up by all these humans with flamethrowers and shotguns and Glocks, and and he's the beetle. Yeah, he at the very end of this issue, the government outnumbers him, shoots him up like he's like Bigfoot or something, and brings him into hostage.
Yeah, and he gets transported. That's where we meet Jason Woodrue. He's the guy who gets to check out the body. He's also the Floronic Man, which we'll see more of later. But Swamp Thing's kind of having his kind of like last thoughts in his head while he's like dead or resting or whatever you'd say he's doing. Kind of running through his life where he sees a lot of people he used to know, his wife Linda, and stuff like that. I mean, Woodrue, while all of this is happening, Woodrue's pretty much dissecting Swamp Thing like just on the table, and he's just finding out that Swamp Thing has pointless organs and stuff like that, and he's trying to figure out like what Swamp Thing really is. And he's like, he has kidneys that don't do anything, he has lungs that don't actually have a function. Like, what is this creature? And this is kind of where they start to begin a major retcon in Swamp Thing. Little note is that Alan Moore, prior to taking the job, actually ran it by Len Wein, who actually chose Alan Moore to write this book. Alan Moore had the reverence at least to ask, like, yeah, I'd like to take the job, but is it okay that I do some major changes? And, Len Wein, the creator of this character, he couldn't be more eager, he said, for everything to go down. And once you read this issue, it really makes sense. It really adds a certain level of like nuance to this character. That's where we find out that Holland never really became the Swamp Thing, but rather Swamp Thing has always thought that it was Alec Holland. He describes it through the Glenarian worms. So like an organism that kind of feeds on like the tissue or anything that happens like that. When he blew up, his body died. He ran into the swamp on fire. He died in the swamp, and the biorestorative formula is already in the swamp, and kind of like a miracle almost, if you want to call it that, the like vegetation kind of eats or, kind of takes on the sentience of Alec Holland. And that's something that was game changing for Swamp Thing at this point in time.
Totally new direction of the character. We always associated Alec Holland as Swamp Thing, but matter of fact, not only does Swamp Thing find out, but we find out as an audience that Alec Holland died when his lab exploded. It's just a bunch of plants thinking that they are him. And the reason we find this out is because Jason Woodrue, the doctor that was hired, basically finds some random article about worms. There was an experiment with worms back in the day, and they were supposed to get through some kind of obstacle course basically to the very end. And for the worms that could perform that task, they were fed to the worms that couldn't. And then these worms now knew how to finish the maze. And so that's basically what happened with the plants. And when eating his body in the explosion, they retained his memories, his thoughts, and that's why he tries to look humanoid, even though he's actually completely plant. And it messes up Swamp Thing mentally too, because he now feels like he does not have a lot of purpose in life because Alec Holland doesn't exist anymore. He's literally just a plant that thinks he's Alec Holland.
And then, he kind of states, Woodrue has to go up to Sunderland's office because Sunderland's a real bastard. And he pretty much lets him know, he's like, you're fired now. I don't need you. You did like the legwork to find the breakthrough. I can just get new scientists and we can continue doing what we're doing here. You get lost. And Woodrue, I mean, he's an observant. He's a smart asshole. And, he pretty much pays attention to what Sunderland does as far as like all the computer systems, all of the research knowledge. And he knows obviously everything about Swamp Thing at this point since he got to dissect them. And kind of in a vengeance or, in a snarky way, he says, you can't kill a vegetable by shooting it in the head. And I love that line because it's goofy, but it's true. I mean, if you think about it, but, and that kind of is when Swamp Thing opens his eyes back up. He's out of the cryo freezer. Sunderland just couldn't resist himself. He had to go take a peek, and Swamp Thing's alive. And he knows that he's not Holland now. He's read like the little dossier, the little journal, and he strangles Sunderland, dude. He picks him up and he kills his ass. And there's even like a line there of dialogue where he's like, Swamp Thing wasn't even like known to like intentionally hurt or kill people. But Swamp Thing, losing his kind of sense of purpose, the one thing he clung on to, regaining his humanity, now that he knows that, he just kind of snaps a little bit. And I mean, it's really sad because it's kind of like in a way like a Frankenstein type thing, kind of losing losing everything you had, and like now he's got to kind of adjust to his new reality.
He no longer has a sense of purpose. He kills the man responsible of him learning that he has no purpose, and Woodrue escapes, but is still very passionate about finding more information about Swamp Thing because he's Floral himself. And so Swamp Thing being not as healthy or like in a mental panic, Woodrue is able to take him back to the swamp and perform more experiments on him to better understand him and his connection to the green.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of find Abby and Matt. They're looking through the swamp too. They're trying to find, Swamp Thing, try and, hook up with him since, shit's hitting the fan for them and pretty much everybody Swampy knows. And then, Swampy, we see him rooted and he's in his own head, pretty much trying to cope or rationalize with, all of this new information. Obviously, he's torn up by it. He's kind of fighting for his humanity still, like in his head, but like he ultimately like rationalizes he's a monster now in a way. He's not who he thought he was, even though he has those memories. But pretty much the majority of this issue is kind of him figuring things out for himself in his head while he's rooted. And we ultimately see Woodrue trying to tap into the green himself, obviously because he has sort of an affliction like Swamp Thing, but he's still human with floronic abilities or, powers, but they're just swamping their own humanity, as they put it. And he doesn't want to be human, as where Swamp Thing does. So I find that pretty interesting too, that the floronic man, kind of covers himself with like a spray can of like skin paint, which is goofy as all hell, but I mean, it does a good job. I mean, they should get a ringing endorsement. But I just find it cool that, one of Swamp Thing's villains is pretty much the opposite of him as well, but in a different way, and not an arcane way where, good scientist, bad scientist. And it's more of a plant that wants to be human versus human that wants to be plant. And it's kind of where we're at.
And the cool thing about that too is he doesn't even hate Swamp Thing, not at all. He just wants to control the green, and this is kind of his opportunity to do so. So now that Abby and Matt are gone from looking for the swamp because he explained to them what exactly Swamp Thing is going through mentally, it gives him the time to kind of tap into the green. And Alan Moore explains what the green is in this next issue, which is issue 23. So it's essentially all grass, plant life, nature, all around the world. And it's got a counterpart called the red, which is like all animals, mammals, humans. But Swamp Thing is now sensing there is red in his mind in the green, which is the doctor, which is Woodrue, and can also sense that he's killing people just randomly, like that group of teenagers, which is weird and evil. And so it's finally when the green starts devouring Abby, which he has some kind of romantic attachment to, that he finally snaps out of figuring out his identity and he's okay with being the Swamp Thing instead of Alec Holland, and goes to save Abby before she's too late.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of to expound on a couple things you said, like Woodrue's roasting a whole city at this point while Swampy's still, kind of moping around. But I do really like the line while he's like in his head right before he kind of comes to it. And he says, "They wouldn't let me be human. I became a monster. Wouldn't let me be a monster. So I became a plant. And then they wouldn't let me be a plant." And so Swamp Thing, he kind of accepts his position in things now. He knows he's not human. He's not really a monster. He's somehow a plant, but he's also so much more. I also like this touch too, is that Swamp Thing does come back for Abby, but when she says Alec and she greets him, he says, "I'm not Alec." And she's just like, "What are you?" He's like, "I'm Swamp Thing." And I like that. He's closing the page on who he thought he was. And, he's writing his own story now as the Swamp Thing. Like, he's like very situationally aware. He's in tune with the green. He still has humanity in him. Obviously, he's very moral. He cares about things. He still has relationships, but he's not for humanity necessarily anymore. He is for good, and he's ultimately for the green. And then we see Swamp Thing come back, and he says, "I'm going to beat your ass" to Woodrue because he's tired of getting chopped up like a vegetable on a chop. And he's just ready, dude. He's like, "You can't be doing this shit out here. This is my territory."
Yeah, I like at the very end of this issue in particular, Woodrue becomes Woodrue with the hyphen, right? And the Justice League gets called because Woodrue is basically basically taking the oxygen away from all the human beings so that they can suffocate to death, so that it's just purely plant life.
I'm not correcting you. I think it's the opposite. I think he's making the plants produce so much oxygen they can't make fires anymore without blowing up.
Oh, yep, you're right.
And it's just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I wouldn't want to deal with either one. And you could think that the plants could do either, like technically. But it's just like, he's fucked up, dude. Like, he's just like, yeah, no plants. No, all plants, no animals. And it's just like, he doesn't really think about what he's doing, as we kind of see later on. But I like that Swampy comes up. He doesn't want any of that bullshit. And he just gives him a good wallop. And he says, fight me like a man. And and that pisses off Woodrue, because he's like, I'm not a man. I'm a stupid plant. And they're bitching at each other. And, Woodrue's about to chainsaw Abby. Things aren't going so great. And then Swampy says, the green doesn't want this. You do. And he's like, what's going to change the gases that we need to survive when all the people and animals are gone? And then Woodrue just like cracks like a nut and is just like, what do you mean? He's like, this is what the plants want. And Swamp Thing's like, no, they don't, bro. This is what you want. You're forcing it on the plants. And he's like, we all die if you do this shit. And then, I mean, literally just through talking it out like Wonder Woman 84, Woodrue gets defeated. And which is silly, but I thought it was impactful. I mean, there's really nothing the Floronic Man can do at that point if that's his whole MO. He kind of defeats him in a way, and Swamp Thing's just kind of like at peace. And
it kind of reminded me of that part in Sandman where they're going back and forth, where they're like, well, I'm an ox, and then, well, it's like, well, I'm a bow and arrow with the
true.
So Swamp Thing like mentally defeats him, because the Justice League is so puzzled as to how to defeat Woodrue out of all fucking people that they have to give it to Swamp Thing to beat him in like a mental battle, which I thought was pretty clever. But after his powers weaken because he feels like he's not helping the Green anymore and that he's just actually putting his desires into the situation, the Justice League picks him up for Swamp Thing and drops him off at Arkham Asylum, which is also funny because they did that in Sandman as well. But Swamp Thing takes Abby to the swamp. He tells her that he knows that he's not Alec Holland, and Alec Holland died years ago, and it's a pretty good conclusion to the first villain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just had a couple other things to touch back on that I thought were kind of funny, are when Superman and Green Lantern find Woodrue and they come up on him, and he's kind of like all skittish and crazy trying to hide himself, and they just come up and they're like, man, you look like shit. And he's all disheveled, he's still half a monster and shit, and they're just like, bro, you look garbage. And I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, I mean, Swampy's pretty happy after all this is said and done. And oh yeah, imagine getting alphaed by a fucking plant that doesn't have a functioning brain. Like, this dude dissected him and he's like, this brain isn't even like a brain, it doesn't do anything. And you just got alphaed by him just by like thoughts and words by a giant fucking swamp monster. But imagine. So issue 25 is where things finally kind of start to shift. There's kind of like a different story being told, and it's kind of a weird one, but it was kind of cool all at the same time. I like the fact that they
move from like body horror to like mental horror.
I do like that kind of tonal shift, but I like how we see a guy up front. He's kind of just going around, he's looking at oddities and stuff like that. There's like a Ouija board. He's kind of got like this evil energy around him and stuff like that. And I was like, who is this guy? Like the devil? But I found something really funny when they're kind of like foreshadowing all these bad things are about to happen to everybody he kind of comes across with. But I like that he walks by and he donates to a priest like $13. And they stated that he laughs for a full minute. And I was just like, they're really trying to put over that he's like really evil. And it's just that he donates to priests and fucking chuckles. I think that's just, it's funny. I mean, I don't care if you're religious or not. It's just goofy. But
it's funny.
I like that once we see Swamp Thing, though, after we kind of get introduced to this mysterious character, that he's pretty much playing Creature from the Black Lagoon with Abby, some real Shape of Water shit. Like he's about to, do it to
her. Who's got your ankle?
And it's just wild. And we find out, Abby's trying to adjust. She has a shitty marriage, obviously. I mean, she's been beefing with her hubby the whole time, but she's got a job finally. She works with, I think, autistic kids at some home somewhere.
Children's hospital.
Is it a child? I don't know. Yeah,
that's what I referred to it as.
Oh, word. I'll just call it that. We see this abdominal snowman looking shit, and it kills the kid's parents. And that's kind of why he's fixated on spelling and the weird looking snowman looking thing, which is later referred to as the Monkey King, like kisses his hand. It's like it just ate his parents because they're fucking with the Ouija board. And then it kisses his hand. I was like, that's some real creepy shit, bro. It's like Buffalo Bill, dude. He's going to like tuck his wiener and start singing to you. And it's just like, it's like, I know what you did to, like upstairs, bro. Like you just ate my parents. Don't fucking touch me, bro.
Right. I guess to exist, he needs to have like some kind of tie into the world or something. So he treats the one kid named Paul really well, but like not really, because he fucked his and killed his parents.
Yeah, dude. He fucking eats his parents and sucks his fingers and then just like creeps everyone out. I like how past that we kind of get like the first glimpses of that. Finally realize who the like ominous guy is walking around. It's Jason Blood, and he's much more of a dick in this than I remember him being in anything else. I thought he was kind of like a sophisticated, regal guy, kind of wanted like an old fashioned and, you know, just whatever, just sit by a fireplace, read a magical book. But around here, he's just being an asshole. And he's telling people, he's like, yeah, this chick ain't going to get that lawn chair. You're going to get some stupid shit instead. And then he tells the other salesman guy, he's like, yeah, you're going to get impaled by a swordfish later. And he's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then at the end of this issue, everything goes like he says. This dude bitching at his wife, he's like, why'd you get a fucking swordfish? Slams the brakes, kills the guy with a swordfish, and everything he said was true. It was just kind of like a weird setup because, I mean, at this time, if you're not familiar with Jason Blood or his alter ego for that matter, kind of like what the hell's going on here? And, you know, kind of with the art style, I wasn't 100% sure that it was him. I saw the streak in the hair and I was like, you know what, that's him. But, you know, like I said, the personification of him kind of just threw me off a tiny bit.
It was a weird take on the character, the demon. It was cool that we just read Sandman, who featured the demon, and now this that featured the demon. It seems like he's been popping up pretty regularly in the stuff that we read. But it was a different take on the character for sure. He did seem a little more, not evil, but more mysterious, I guess.
A lot more sinister, dude. Like, he had like bad implications all the time. It's all about the implications.
Yeah. Weird implications. But we now discover Jason Blood is the demon, and Jason Blood sits down with Abby at the very end of this issue to basically tell her future and what he needs to do about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we're left off. We kind of see, you know, next issue, like things are popping off already. We see Swampy and Abby running through the woods, swamp, whatever you want to call it. And the kids are all going wild at the center. Abby kind of learns about the Monkey King, who is so goofy, dude. Like, I like the Monkey King as a character, I guess, because it is really creepy and goofy, as we just mentioned. But just like, why the Monkey King? And like, how did you come up with that one? But you know, Abby finds out because all the kids are like drawing shit like that. But you know, they're running all the way over there. Shit's already hitting the fan, and like she and Swamp Thing already know that. They know that things aren't going to be great at the center, the children's hospital, whatever you want to call it. And we kind of learn a little bit more about the Monkey King, who's weird as all hell. He just turns into your fear, whatever you fear most, which we've seen before in creatures and, you know, villains and stuff like that. But I like the Monkey King because he's got a goofy personality. And I like that Etrigan pops in, also known as, you know, the demon or Jason Blood, and he's ready to tussle with that monkey. And he's just like, nobody asked him shit about it. He just pops up out of nowhere, like rips the roof off and starts like attacking a monkey. And so that was pretty cool. I love the demon, so I welcome that. And then kind of see Matt, Abby's shitty husband, who just wants to get his rocks off pretty much every night, and she don't give it to him. He drunk drives into a tree. So you know, don't do that, kids, if you're listening.
Isn't that crazy? Abby's husband's upset because he basically accuses Abby of spending more time with these kids. She's just like, you're weird, dude, and leaves the house. And he starts drinking and goes to drive to pick her up and gets in this terrible accident, which leads into our last issue where we see this car and it's completely totaled and his body's all mangled up and destroyed and he looks like shit, and a fly lands right on his chest and starts talking to him, and Matt starts crying and freaking out, and the fly's like, all right, well, when you're done crying, listen to me. I can get you out of this situation, but you got to open up your mouth. And so the dude's like, okay. So Matt opens up his mouth. The fly crawls right into it. That's fucking gross as fuck.
I'll try anything once.
I'd rather die, right? Could be an alternative to the movie The Fly. But anyways, meanwhile, the demon Abby and Swamp Thing still have no resolve for the Monkey King. And Paul, the child, finally stands up to it, knowing that this thing that killed its parents is just striking fear into people. And so he tells the Monkey King that he's not scared of him anymore and whatsoever. And the Monkey King keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking until finally he's small enough where the demon picks him up and eats him.
Dude, hell yeah. I love that Paul just finally just grows a pair out of nowhere and he's like, you a bitch. He's like, you suck. No earnings. You're trash. And like the whole monkey just shrinks like in the meantime, dude. He's
He
just
says your wife
roasting
makes
shit.
more than you do.
He says you sit to pee, bro.
Right.
And I just love that like Paul out of nowhere just like grows a pair and he's just like, fuck you, dude. And after it kisses his hand like 1,000 times. And then yeah, Etrigan just eats it, which also rules. That's one way to do it. It's like he's done it before. He's like, yeah, they always taste pretty good, huh? And everyone's just sitting there like, what the fuck? And that's kind of where we find after that, Abby's like running after him and she finds out Blood is the demon, but that they do have like split personalities because they've been tied together so long. They kind of do act more alike than they used to. But she asks him like, what did the demon mean about what's going to happen to me? And he's just like, look, if he told you something, he's like, I would probably, listen to it. I don't know what the hell he's getting on about, but sometimes like he'll give you advice and sometimes he even tells the truth. So that's pretty ominous. I mean, we don't get to find out what happens to Abby. That's obviously continued in the run, but it's pretty interesting. And then at the end, we see Matt, after swallowing the fly, picks her up good as new. I thought that was pretty funky because we never got to see the resolution of that, which I'm sure we'll also find out later on in the story. But yeah, I thought like it was a pretty good way to kind of end it. It's a good cliffhanger for if you did like this trade to go ahead and read some more of it. But I thought it was pretty cool.
I like that Abby goes chasing after the demon and doesn't know what the demon was talking about because he's back to being Jason Blood. Swamp Thing is left with that kid named Paul, and he takes him back to the hospital. They have like a cute, fun conversation. Swampy's a pretty cool dude.
Yeah, dude, he's chill.
So he made sure that he was safe. Swampy goes back to the swamp. And for the grand finale, Abby was walking alongside the road when her husband comes driving by. But like I said earlier, that car was totaled. But when he drove by, there wasn't a scratch on it, nor himself. And so he rolls down the windows and apologizes to her and offers her a ride home, which concludes the series. But I think that's exactly what the demon was talking about, because he ate that fly and now everything's okay. But you'd have to read past the first book to really know that. It's definitely something I'm debating because it was such a good series. And at the very last panel of this series, Alan Moore dedicates the story to the King Kirby, Jack Kirby.
Yeah, dude.
And so I thought that was pretty tasteful too. A few episodes ago in Comic Book Junkies, I mentioned my ideal creative team would have been Alan Moore and Jack Kirby together. That kind of made me want it even more. But that's all I have to say on the issue. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to also agree that I had a note about that too, that I liked the little touch, that little ode to Kirby at the end. I thought that was very tasteful and cool. But no, I say we just get into, ratings, how we felt about it, give a little brief summary about what we're feeling. I'll just start it off, bro. Talking through it, I had a lot more fun than I guess I did reading it, honestly. I mean, it's a good story, don't get me wrong, but I gave it a 7 out of 10. That's just basing it off of the scale of other things that I've read, or that we've reviewed rather. And, a lot of these books are very good, but when you're going to read the amount of stories that we're going to read, I can't give everything a 9. So I think that it's a good story. It's interesting. It's fun. I think that there's some issues that feel more filler, even though it is kind of working to retcon the character and kind of, transform him into something different. I think it's all really good though. I mean, Alan Moore doesn't write bad stories. I just think that outside of like issue 21 and some of the goofy stuff, that like it's a good story, but it didn't knock my socks off, I guess. I wasn't like chomping at the bit to read more, but I did enjoy what I read. I'd put it that way. The art is kind of also a point of contention, I suppose. I thought it was very beautifully drawn. The layouts, Swamp Thing himself looked perfect. I think it's just when it got more into the more human aspect of character work, there were at least some panels that were kind of funky. I'm not degrading the artist or denigrating or doing anything like that, because they did a great job all in all. It fits the ambiance of what Alan Moore was writing, but it's just some of the faces were looking real blocky and real weird and stuff like that. But overall, 7 out of 10's not a damnation or anything like that. I think it's actually really great. What do you think?
I was gonna rate it a 9.5 out of 10. I thought it was just a skosh better than Sandman, both being kind of in the horror genre. The only thing that didn't make it a 10 out of 10 for me is that I wish the villains were cooler. Woodrue was a little not intimidating in appearance.
He read too many books.
Yeah, he was kind of a bitch. And so was the Monkey King. And it was kind of funny and tasteful in the context of what it was. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of like a Starscream villain for Transformers. You know what I mean? But I wish I would have saw something cooler for Swamp Thing. Now, the story was really well told. But again, I was kind of wishing for something a little stronger than, something that came out of a Ouija board and like a floral person. But the storytelling was off the charts. The art overall was really good. Definitely rivals Immortal Hulk for my favorite horror story that I've read in comics.
No kidding.
And I'm never disappointed in Alan Moore's writing. I think this is kind of why I like DC more than Marvel, because they never have any runs in comics that are kind of bold like this. Their stories are usually like Disney-fied even before, all the Marvel movies. So I thought it was kind of courageous to take an unpopular character like this and kind of bring him to the forefront. And so definitely a really good read for me. I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10. So that would be my overview of the story.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of the few times we've actually kind of had a little bit of a spread on our ratings, but you know what? That's good. That means, different strokes for different folks. Some of you are going to like it the way Joe does, some of you are going to like it the way I do. We're just trying to steer you in the right direction. But you know what? With all that being said, I've got nothing else on Swamp Thing. How about you?
Nothing. I'd say let's go into DC Frontier and Spec Corner.
Chicka Spec Corner. All right, so to stop back into Spec Corner, I mean, it's kind of like a littered street now. There's kind of used needles. There's kind of used condoms too. It's getting kind of dirty over here. There's too much shit going on. The neighborhood's getting rough. And you know what? I think part of that's due to the downturn in the economy, because we recommended Yara Flor first appearance last time we were on Spec Corner, our first time on Spec Corner. It was great. Everybody kept up the bushes and everybody was watering the plants. And it was nice. We had bright eyes and we were like, yeah, we got this. So, moral of the story, we still love her. I think after reading the actual story, she still kicks ass. I like her almost more than Diana, which is probably heresy to most of you. I've just never been personally drawn to Diana other than the fact that she is classic and she is cute. But to actually have a Wonder Woman that kind of speaks more to what I like about the character, I still love her. I still think it's got legs. I think that the exact issue that we specified to pick up, DC Future State Wonder Woman issue 1, is kind of, overprinted. A lot of people, rode the wave. They're like, duh. But I think that you still hold that book. I still think I don't buy variants. I think holding on to a few different covers of that still wise. But you should be looking at Death Metal 7. That's her first cameo. I'm not a big cameo guy, but, cover your bases, gang. Wonder Woman Annual 4 can fucking suck it from the back. That's not a real book. That's just a brown child on the beach. That's not specifically Yara Flor. Stop reaching. So I would disavow, but we got new Spec for you, and I don't think we're gonna miss.
Well, I was going to say I completely agree with you. Death Metal 7 is the way to go. I'm guessing that when all is said and done, because there's still some ambiguity behind it, that the first issue of Future State Wonder Woman will be her first full appearance, but it was very high in print. So I think the cameo is going to be the more sought after book this time because it was lacking in print. So definitely Dark Knight's Death Metal 7. Try to get copies if you can. And you're completely right. Wonder Woman Annual 4 is a joke. For those that were listening to our last Spec Corner, we tipped you off on Red X, which is already gaining value. So his first appearance in continuity, it might not be his first overall appearance, but first appearance in continuity is pretty important. So that's going up in value. And then just like Berger was adding there towards the end, we got Robin issue 1, which is the first appearance of a new character named Flatline.
Hell yeah, dude. So, I like to look at the solicits when I'm bored. I also listened to an interview recently with Joshua Williamson, who's kind of helped spearheading Infinite Frontier now. He's kind of doing like a little bit of the Scott Snyder thing now, where Joshua Williamson, James Tynion, the fourth or whatever the hell. They're kind of spearheading kind of like the new wave of DC, which I mean, that has yet to be seen if it's going to rule or if it's going to kind of suck ass. But Robin 1, he's going to be writing that. They already introduced some art for Flatline. Flatline's going to be like a new kind of teenage female sidekick. She's kind of got like a little bit of a skull ambiance going on, kind of like that dead girl vibe. We don't know ultimately too much about her other than she is supposed to be the sidekick to Lord Deathman, who is very obscure. I mean, he's back from what, the 60s, 70s, or 60s, yeah, from a Batman issue 180 is his first appearance. Kind of a one-off, kind of faded into obscurity. But if you knew the Bata manga, the manga for Batman that they made, which I haven't actually read, but I've seen panels of, and it looks goofy as all fuck. Lord Deathman's running around with a handgun and shit and always being goofy. So I like the fact that Lord Deathman is, one, getting prominent spec, and two, that he's getting his own sidekick, which honestly, you know, the way that things go nowadays, she looks very cosplayable, which, you know, that ain't for me. But I mean, I don't dictate what the masses enjoy and how they speculate, but I think that she's going to be cool. And I'd like to see how she kind of, you know, deals with Robin, because, you know, Robin's pretty much a shithead now.
Yeah, she kind of reminds me of Livewire in a sense. Kind of almost fits that category with like even Harley Quinn in Batman Adventures 12. But I guess to conclude, now that we've wrapped it up a little bit on Spec Corner, what do you think about DC Infinite Frontier?
To be real, I don't know. So I think that it's going to be a mixed bag. I think it's going to follow a lot of what DC Future State's doing. I think there'll be a couple books that generate hype. I think there'll be like one or two gold nuggets, maybe. I'm kind of just being optimistic at this point because nothing in Future State, I haven't read a lot of it, but you know, just looking at it, none of it really interests me other than, you know, Yara Flor, Wonder Woman, and, you know, to a lesser degree, Teen Titans. But I think it's going to be kind of more of the same. I know that some of the regular titles are coming back and they're just going to kind of, you know, shoehorn in whatever was successful for Future State, but the creative teams are kind of leaving me, you know, wanting more. I get that, you know, we got to have, you know, new talent rise up and kind of hone their chops, but I don't also like the fact that they're giving Superman and Action Comics to one guy again. I hated it when they did it with Bendis because I don't like Venus. He's fuck him, dude. But anyways, I don't care for him. And then I don't want some guy who he isn't even like established, and he gets whole creative control over the character for how long? They need to start splitting that up again. And then just the rest of the teams, it's just like, what are you doing? It's like the art's all right and the writers doing God knows what. They're just trying to make characters to make characters. And so I want to be bullish on it. The only thing that I really think I'm going to grab is Robin 1, because like we just said, spec. And then I hope it's a good story. And then I'm going to obviously get Wonder Girl. That's also partially spec because that would be her first appearance as Wonder Girl and not as Wonder Woman. So, I mean, if you want to grab that one too, hey, why wouldn't you? I am. But I actually genuinely enjoy Yara Flor, so I'm going to read that eagerly, but it's going to be slim pickings at DC for me. And you have heard me plenty of times now. I love DC, but I would have to be forcing myself to read the DC shit nowadays. Like there's nothing just genuinely coming out that's hot. Like I'm starting to read more Marvel stuff and genuinely be more impressed. How about you, dog?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. So you brought up a lot of good points. I think that DC Infinite Frontier is good in the sense that there's more spec. It leads the way to a new generation of heroes and villains. And I've already been very impressed with Yara Flor, even though she's no longer getting a show on the CW for whatever reason. I'm also excited, that they're trying to bring Red X and Static Shock into the main continuity. However, most of Infinite Frontier kind of looks like trash. And I can see it getting pretty bad, similar to the New 52 or Rebirth. You know, it's kind of the same old shit all over again. Although people are bored of like the old generation of the Justice League characters, I still feel like there's a lot of really good stories that haven't been told yet, as some of their best properties never have gotten good ongoings or creative teams. They've never figured out the Flash. They've never figured out Diana Wonder Woman. They've never figured out Green Arrow. They've never figured out Green Lantern. And it just frustrates me that they have all these cool properties and they can't do anything with them. So they try to create new characters, which isn't always a bad thing. It's frustrating as a reader because I think DC has all the properties in the world. So they scaled back on books they're releasing. And so that should give them more money or resources to put better creative teams towards their their like best characters, and they continue to neglect them. I even had to drop Superman when Tomasi left, and now I'm dropping Detective Comics for that exact same reason. And so it's a little frustrating. I wish for hope. I hope that Infinite Frontier proves me wrong and brings, some life back into DC. But I still feel like there's a lot they can do with those old characters. And now that they're scaling back, I was hoping they'd put better creative teams towards those characters instead of creating a whole new set of heroes and villains.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to piggyback. I'm not done being negative yet. So I kind of agree with what you're saying. I think I phrased it wrong too. I like when they create new characters rather than just, replacing or, doing this and that. I mean, legacy characters are what DC's built on, but it's more so when they're trying to push us a new superhero or villain before they even come out and they're like, this is the next big thing. And it's like, no, you literally just put a Rick and Morty fan with fucking paint on their head as a fucking new villain. No one gives a fuck. Why would I care about that? Have you seen Miracle Molly or whatever they're putting in Batman?
Fuck that.
It looks like a drug raver bullshit, dude. Like, whatever, dude. She gets turned out at the fucking club. Who cares? Screw that. And then, as you mentioned, Static Shock. It's good to see Milestone bringing him back because one, Milestone has been fucking in the fucking Sahara for what, decades now, it feels like. So it's just like, bring that back, restore those characters. Static Shock rules. Watching that TV show growing up on WB was the shit. But also, the redesign, slow as hell, dog. Did you see how, I thought it actually looked good up until the point I saw he has a stiff ass hood with a built-in hat into it. I was like, who the fuck would wear that? Especially if you're a superhero, dude, just grab a hat. But regardless, that's dumb. And then my last big gripe, Brian Michael Bendis, like I said, disavow. He gets Justice League now, which on paper is probably like, oh, wow, that'll be interesting. But I didn't like Superman, and now he's putting Black Adam on the fucking team. Why? Just put Shazam there. He's the good version of Black Adam. Oh, but Rock's going to be in the movie. Yeah, it's not going to fucking come out for another year or whenever. Oh my God, what are you guys doing? I mean, and then it's just like we talked about the corporate restructure. All the old heads are gone. All the editors that knew anything are fucking gone. I've even talked to shop owners and they're talking like they actually do want to get rid of print comics, or they want to just transition to paperbacks, or they want to do mostly digital first. It's just like, please don't make this the death knell for DC. Like, they're my favorite characters. Just tread water if you have to. Stop overthinking it.
Well said, Burger. Well, I don't have any closing thoughts after that. I think that was a pretty good way to sum it up. Anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, dude. The only thing I want to get off my chest is where you can find us before we let you know what's happening next time. So make sure, you know what? Actually, I'm not going to take this approach anymore. I've asked kindly, going on 18 episodes. I'm telling you that you leave us a review, you give us 5 stars, you tell all of your friends. I don't care if they hate comics, you tell them. Comic Book Junkies. Tell them where to find it. It's everywhere. No excuses.
For the Monkey King's coming.
Yeah, dude, he's gonna suck your finger and kill your parents. But anyways, so if you don't want that shit coming towards you, you need to tell everybody you know. Scream it, get on top of your house, get a ladder, go up, hug the chimney if you're scared of heights, and just yell about Comic Book Junkies. Nobody will yell at you, I swear. But tell everyone you know. Tell them where you can find us. You know where it is. It's at CBJ Pod on Instagram. Talk to us. Slide in our DMs. Do you like comics? Do you want to come on? Are you interesting? You know what? If not, maybe you have an interesting friend who wants to talk comics. Tell them to come on. Ask us a question. We'll gladly answer it. We love talking clearly. You know what? Just hit us up. You know where to find us. CBJ Podcast on Facebook as well. No excuses. I'll let you know. Also, shouts out France.
You guys are religiously downloading. We love you. If you pay the shipping, we'll definitely send you something.
Yeah, I love you.
Hot dog buns or a little piece of America.
God bless. Apple pie and fucking pack of hot dogs. I don't know. But either way, shouts out France. If you made it all the way to the end of this, we appreciate you for sure. You're definitely like downloading like first one every day. You rule. But you know, the rest of you guys rule too. I mean, I just don't keep track. Like I see France pop up, like that's pretty like glaring. But you know what? Everybody, thank you for your continued support. We We appreciate every single one of you. I mean, obviously we wouldn't keep doing this if we didn't have great listeners like you guys and gals. But what are we hitting them with next time, Joe?
Okay, so next episode, all goes according to plan. We're gonna have our second guest on,
Woo woo.
Juan Florencia, also my brother. A little background for you too. He was actually supposed to start Comic Book Junkies with us. He's the reason I started collecting in the first place because of scheduling differences and, just different stage in his life. We decided to move forward with just Berg and I, but we're definitely excited to have him on and definitely excited for a new guest. So he's been collecting a lot longer than we have, and we'll definitely bring a old head edge to the podcast.
Absolutely. And I couldn't be more excited myself. It's going to be a fun conversation, you guys. But I think that's all. I've said my piece. Have you said yours?
I'm good.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you next time.